three pillars of your remote workplace. The origin of this topic, it really came from internal conversations that we were having. We were reflecting back on some of the recent content that we did around NIST cybersecurity framework. And for those of you who may not have attended that, we talked a little bit about efforts on security left of boom and right of boom. Just how you want to pursue some of those identify, protect, detect types of efforts instead of focusing just on on the center there. And then we also did some presentations on Center for Internet Security, the CIS 20 critical security controls. And of course, that's more prescriptive. It talks about specific tasks and specific things to look at. But what we really want to do is kind of take a step back and kind of make it a little bit more strategic. So today, my content's going to be a little bit more strategic in how you plan and organize and structure for some of those things. And then in the afternoon session, it's going to be a little bit more tactical and get into specific questions and situations. So I just want to make sure and share that that a little bit different content, a little bit from what we do. But part of that was geared around the fact that several of the attendees were seemed to be a little bit more strategic in nature. CXOs and or higher level IT people. So this was adjusted to kind of aim a little bit more at you guys, and just kind of help through that proper design for co-creation of solutions from both your business requirements and an organization's technical capabilities. So from the agenda, you can kind of see that I plan on starting off the day chatting a little bit about work from home. A big part of it I'll cover through some of the frameworks, as well as I will dive into some specifics and some of the bigger challenges in each of those three different areas, and kind of chat through how the leadership activities you need to kind of help drive that plan. Create the plan, work the plan, however you want to think about it. And then at the end, I always like to talk a little bit about continuous service improvement or continuous improvement. That's a key part of our operations and how we deliver what we do. I like to think of the help desk pays the price for what we did in the past. So it's important for an IT organization to think about the future and have that technology roadmap and continually figuring out ways to move forward. And just in case you spoke to my wife, when I talk about continuous improvement, I'm not talking about my lack of continuous improvement. I think she's about to fire me for never getting to my chores. But hey, I'm not really good at plumbing or electrical work, so all that happens is after I do the work, then we have to pay someone to fix what I did anyway. So different kind of continuous improvement. So stepping into a little bit about remote workplace, some of you had no remote work before. Some of you are doing it now. Some of you aren't doing as much now, but I'm just kind of curious to learn a little bit about what's going on with you guys. If there's anything that you want to post in the window, feel free. But I like to think that from our own annual planning conversations, I've kind of pointed out several times to my team that, hey, I'm from a generation that I would say mostly believe that there's no substitute for face-to-face interactions and face-to-face meetings. I've managed teams of 100 and less than a handful. And I guess as a leader, as a manager, I feel that I'm at my absolute best when I'm face to face and with the situation, face to face with my teammates, face to face as a leader, coworker, however you see it, and it's kind of a hard habit to break, if you will. But looking through the reality, Inc. magazine estimated something like 40% of Americans began telecommuting when COVID broke out. If you think about it, that's almost half the workforce began telecommuting, and I think that was factoring out the people who were already telecommuting. But that's a huge number, and it also, I guess, forced me into thinking about a different way of doing things or a better way of doing things. Likewise, if you just went through our recent snow event or ice power water event, whatever you want to call it, or I guess around the office, some people called it Snowvid. Is that right, David? Ice apocalypse. Anything else?
I called it snowpocalypse.
Snowpocalypse. Okay. But if you weathered that, no pun intended, then you probably have a pretty good work from home type of experience in place. But the challenge out of that is, there's some evolving risks out of that. And so in the content that I have today, I tried to not focus on those things that are normal security things that we were talking about, 2 years ago, and try to focus on some of the different changes. Some of the things that we have to factor in now is, looking at the newest generation or the next to the newest generation. There's actually a generation after the millennials, but 77% of millennials believe that working from home makes them more productive. I think that came from a Regis survey. And depending on the type of workers you have, there could be implications from the type of workers. I think 78% of remote workers have like a college degree or higher. So you may have special needs for that work from home if you've got a younger workforce, or if you've got a more knowledge worker type of workforce that you're trying to keep up with. So some of the impact of organizations that concern us is, hey, our network border's gone. It used to be we had a hard candy shell on our networks and a soft, chewy center, so that if people were trying to get into our network, the first thing they had to do is get past our firewall. Well, now that we're working from home, we've kind of gotten rid of that. So, our network border's gone forever, or are there other things that we need to factor in as we talk through that? In our annual planning, we also talked about, what that means for our culture. In Fulcrum Group, we've got our 6 core values that we talk about all the time, and part of our culture is kind of a fun-loving get-together, hang out, and de-stress periodically. But we just haven't been able to do some of those kinds of things. So work from home has really challenged us in how we maintain relationships. The nature of IT. If you're kind of in a role where you respond to emergencies all the time, is that it can create a lot of stress. And I know some of you are in IT roles, and everybody's emergency becomes your emergency. And sometimes it's hard in a remote situation for them to know all the different things you're working on, or that you're working on another person's emergency, so you can't get to their emergency right away. But the relationships and culture are a big part of what is needed for us as teammates and coworkers. And then understanding if we're going to work with relationships and around reinforcing our culture, with all the new tools and situations that we're in, are there new communications that need to happen? Are there different things we need to do with emails or instant messages, or handling the different events that we have, the meetings that are all remote or video conferenced? And then the last thing I kind of talked about here was just, what does this mean for office space in general? Office space kept climbing and climbing, and our lease was up for renewal during the middle of COVID. And fortunately, I've been able to extend it twice because, I'm not sure, do we even need our building anymore and all the space, and, if people aren't coming in and working out of the office. So, those are all some of the different remote workplace changes to organizations. And so, before I get into that, I don't know how many of you know Edward Deming. He's, coming from, getting a business degree in the 80s, 90s meant that, everybody was kind of hammered with Deming. But, he was kind of the father of total quality management, worked with the Japanese, and, really took off, and, helped create a lot of manufacturing things that still drive us today. But one of his sayings that I absolutely loved was, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. And so I talk to this a lot to our engineers and our team about being able to systematize things and describe things as processes, but that extends to us as leaders of the organization. So, in the organization, having a structure to our efforts usually will make us more successful. And as an example of this, I've displayed some of the different screens or some of the different management methods there. But I just thought I'd do a quick poll here and see if I can get you guys to respond to a quick poll here. So I'm going to launch this. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with some of the different management frameworks out there, but I just thought while I talk through this, I would just ask you which one of these you use, if you use any of these or none of these. Let me switch back to my screen so I can keep walking through the presentation. Actually, I don't know if it'll let me through unless I submit as well. There we go. So right now it's looking like of the 5 people who responded. Hello. Of the 5 people who responded, or actually we've got about 13 votes in. Any more? So I'll go ahead and let that keep feeding through as you guys respond to it. But the whole point of the conversation is that there's a lot of different ways to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. I'm having a hard time getting back to my screen here. There we go. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, we actually use scaling up. It used to be Rockefeller Habits, but the great thing about Rockefeller Habits is you can take it in pieces. It was designed for growing organizations, and it's been around for a few years. But I just absolutely love that I could take it a bite at a time. And as a busy manager, leader, whatever, you're not always able to embrace everything all at once. Traction is probably the most popular method now. They've got kind of their entrepreneurial operating system, EOS, but it's basically a holistic basic model that has a whole bunch of different tools and processes that kind of help you align and synchronize across the business. If you also read the book Rocket Fuel. I also read that, and that was really good. I love how it dug into, as organizations, making sure that you have not just the visionary who's trying to come up with the best ideas and things going on, but also having that integrator role, that the person who is able to turn vision into action. A great statement that I heard recently was that, if you're having sales problems for your organization, it's probably a strategy issue. If you're having profitability issues for the organization, it's probably an operational issue. So, it kind of gives you both sides of that. And, the importance of Rockefeller Habits, scaling up, OKR, all the different methodologies is, it helps you tiptoe down the path of the things that you need to do, as opposed to making these broad changes every couple of years that freak people out and make it hard to tolerate. It's always easier to steer a ship in the right direction if you're making incremental changes every hour, as opposed to one big change, every other day. So it kind of follows that same philosophy. Also, from Scaling Up, for those of you who are interested, I believe that we plan to give away a couple of books of Scaling Up today. But the Scaling Up, it breaks things up into what it calls the 4 decisions that everybody must make, and it hits on people, strategy, execution, and cash. The great thing there that I love about it is they make their tool set available online. So if you go to their website, you can download any of their little tools and walk through the exercises. And when we first started with Rockefeller Habits, that's exactly what we did. Is we took advantage of the free tools and did a tool at a time. You can actually do it at a department level as well. And the whole goal there is the right people doing the right things the right way. So a lot of similarity to other Jim Collins and Patrick Lencioni and some of the other authors out there, and their books that reinforce some of the things that are there. see. And moving on, we did throw out, three different areas, three different pillars in regards to work from home. And I've got kind of a list of my cybersecurity challenges, but I did want to go ahead and poll you guys again. Just so you know, before 50% of the group said they use objectives and key results, OKR, 9% scaling up, 5% EOS, 14% other, and 23% none. So my next poll here. Hello. Waiting to scroll up here. Is about security. And so I just thought I'd ask you guys what you think. What's your organization's biggest security challenge? And the great thing here is you can select multiple different things as you respond. I'll come back to that in a second. But for the things that I put together, things that are different than the normal things that I talk about security, things that are brought about by the changes. I think the big thing for me is just that we spent all those years building up infrastructure and funneling everything through a firewall. And with work from home, we completely bypassed everything right off the bat. It kind of forced us into a situation of where, if you've got tools that are domain based or centered around the physical location, that a lot of those go away, and a lot of things become suspect in remote work. As you went through the changes for COVID, you made a whole bunch of changes very quickly. One of the things that NIST tells us is that the best time to do a security audit other than regularly is after you make major network changes. So hopefully if you made some major changes for work from home, then you went back to the well and did some sort of risk assessment. HIPAA also requires the same thing. Going back and doing a risk assessment after you make major changes to the environment. Typically, we rolled out new tools and solutions under the gun. Well, even things like Office 365, as an Office 365 security administrator, there's a lot of different things. To me, Office 365 is a big gaping hole in the middle of your security efforts because there's so many vulnerabilities in there that are just by design or by lack of going in and adding configuration to it. So I highly recommend that, if you do have Office 365, you go through and run Secure Score or get an assessment done against your environment, because there's a lot of data protection and other settings in there that by default aren't enabled and absolutely require you to go through and, make changes in there. It could be simple things like Office 365 has ability to, set rules so that if somebody tries to forward a mailbox, with everything being in the cloud, it makes it easy for mailboxes to get compromised and to get that business email attack or other attack against your environment. And, it does require a little bit of extra effort on your part as security administrator to go through and fix those things. And besides new tools, unknown devices, maybe using home machines as opposed to work machines. Not everyone was blessed with a laptop or a corporate-owned smartphone when everything went down. So, there's a lot of vulnerability there in just the devices we have and the possibility of them getting lost. And then, of course, just the unknown locations. People working from home, you don't think about it, but every PS4, every other home PC, anything behind your home firewall that doesn't have the same controls could impact your devices. There's a saying in security that we have that you're only as secure as your least secure connection. So if your network is highly secure and protected, every home site, every remote office, every hotel that people connect with on guest Wi-Fi is potentially a threat against your network. Let's go back and take a look at where our survey is. And right now, 6% feel like you like breaking your site-based security or too many changes quickly was a challenge. 27% said just adapting to cloud apps and data. Obviously, remote data and remote apps means that you have to go through additional protections to, you don't know what you don't know based on how that user is using the apps and what they're storing on their machines. 21% listed maintaining availability at desired performance levels. Absolutely, as a network engineer, again, an old adage is that as you move further away from as you move your users away from the data, performance drops. And in a cloud environment, if you're using remote desktop services or another tool to connect to your environment, you may experience some performance issues from either the load on the servers, the app's ability to scale, or internet traffic along the way. Protection of remote data, absolutely. Data on machines, data on smartphones. Oh, there's Joey there trying to pop in. And then location or data challenges, and only 3% need a new risk assessment. That's actually very surprising to me, and I would venture to say that after going through major changes, that probably should be top of the list. It's absolutely number one. HIPAA, suggests that you get one every 1 to 3 years, depending on the size of your organization. We do one very regularly as a business associate. Trying to stay on top of those things there. PCI has some requirements around risk assessments and self-assessment kinds of things, but I'd highly recommend on a very low number that if you haven't done a risk assessment recently, that you whether you do it internally or externally, reach out to your team and talk about that. And if nothing else, look at your last risk assessment and find out what the key things were there and what you plan to work on. I'm going through pretty quickly, but I'm running out of time here, so I'll go back to my presentation and skip some of the other content that we have here. Also talked a little bit, we brought up the culture challenges, and in our internal discussions, we had a lot of conversation about, how do we get our team to deal with remote worker stress and, or even training. How do we manage performance and some of those kinds of things? And I'm sure some of those things are things that you're dealing with, and that's where the first, the management framework helps you, benefit from culture, get alignment, get people working together. But, it's also an opportunity to take advantage of some of the different tools out there. I don't know how many of you are using Teams. How many of you were using Teams 2 years ago? But I think we had deployed Teams and kind of had it in place, but it was kind of like, yeah, we don't really get it. It's just another tool that we have access to that we didn't really take advantage. After COVID hit, within the course of 3 months, we moved all of our meetings from being phone, all our morning huddles from being phone conversations to Teams conversations. We started moving more content into instant messages as opposed to emails. And it actually created a situation for us as far as, we finally had to take a step back and felt it was kind of ludicrous to expect our team members to respond quickly to every email, to every message in Teams, and every other type of communication that we had. And we started asking our team that, hey, if you've got something that's time sensitive, try and reach us through Teams first, and then voice, by phone second, because people are more likely to be sitting at their machine working in Teams and getting that pop-up as opposed to email. And so even though email has driven my life for 25 years now, it was a really hard change for me to move over to Teams and utilize that more as a leader in our organization. As far as other communications challenges, within work from home, just trying to figure out work hours, trying to have quiet time. Some of our team now have focus time on their calendars to communicate to others that, hey, I'm doing deep work during this period. So I won't be checking Teams or I won't be doing other stuff to help us understand and get our arms around different types of work and making sure that other people are providing coverage throughout those periods. Also, as we work from home, we really had to amp up our our remote tools, and in our environment that meant maybe some different monitoring tools, and now we've got a separate monitoring tool for systems, PCs, Windows-based devices, and different tools for our infrastructure devices. But for a typical organization, that could just mean that utilizing Teams and pushing more content into Teams. Microsoft Ignite is going on right now, where they roll out, all their initiatives and improvements and things, and they're really pushing Power Apps, and they made Power App available in the desktop version for free. They used to be charged for that because they're really seeing organizations benefit from all the different tools and capabilities and being able to automate a process or automate a workflow. When I was actually at Redmond in December of 2018, actually hanging out with Joey from Ingram, and they were going through these case studies where organizations were pushing email into Teams and all these other things that I didn't quite get. But flash forward a year later, and now we're doing the same things. We've got dashboards, Power BI dashboards that are showing up within Teams, and we've got special groups for threat intelligence and other things so that we can share it across the entire organization very quickly. And it's really, in work from home, it's really kind of changed our world and gotten us away from some of the old tools of how we used to do things, and also introduced new problems, like meeting fatigue. So it really, there's a good and a bad of every technology and every tool, and so as managers and as leaders, we have to be able to deal with that. And one of the things that we didn't cover in our discussion of the three pillars was digital transformation. How are you looking at tools and considering that in your environment? Here's kind of some of the different digital transformation accelerators to think about. But as a leader, the important thing for you is you may not quite understand what digital transformation means. It's really, it's more than just automation. It's all the organization working together and mixing your people, your computers, your processes, and trying to embed technology into your organizational processes. But if you're leading initiatives, the four different areas that you probably want to look at are, around customer experience. For Fulcrum as a service provider, a lot of our efforts are around, customer experience. But it could be, in manufacturing, it might be operational framework. Trying to figure out, or maybe a nonprofit, using dashboards and business intelligence to, target impact of your programs. Customer experience, outside our industry, in healthcare, that might be using population statistics for, upstream handling of, different at-risk members or different groups you're trying to get deeper connection with. If you're trying to transform your industry, that might be for local government. That might be smart cities. We've been talking about it for years, but now with the Internet of Things, there's connected traffic lights that get data from sensor and maybe adjust their cadence based on cars that are actually on the road at the time. Real-time traffic events. Help out with congestion. If you're trying to transfer your market, in manufacturing, it might just be, artificial intelligence to, stimulate new ideas or, kind of influence efficiency, reduce waste, all the things that Deming's spoke about, your Mira, Muda, waste areas. And then the last thing I really wanted to hit today was just, continuous improvement. And we went through, we pushed everything out. We're working from home, but that should be a process. Just like security is a process, network design is a process, management is a process. It's important to have kind of a structure to, to continually improve and build agility. This was always one of those things that you think you know something, and then it really hits you. When I first was reading about Darwin and on the origin of species, and we talked about natural selection and survival of the fittest, I always took the fittest to mean the strongest or the smartest. But after going back and rereading some of these books and content, I realized that as a business, the survival of the fittest is more about the organization that's the most agile, the one that can adapt to situations and adjust to kind of a changing environment. And for ourselves, I joke around with David a lot that we're kind of a different business every 3 years because IT and technology is always changing, and we've got to adapt to it to be able to continue to add value back to our clients and organizations. And then likewise for you, you want to make sure that you've got that agility for organizational survival. You've got to make sure that you keep getting it right, and that your work from home efforts stay right. Your cybersecurity and work from home stays right, and communication culture, all of those. I know I've been talking a lot, but I did kind of want to summarize things up. And if you did have questions, get to some of those. But my key ideas here out of this were just hey, it's it's helpful for you to embrace a management framework and practices so that you do have structure to those decisions that you're making and why you're making them. That as you continue to look at work from home, the job's not done just because you're working remotely. There's ongoing security, communications, and cultural impacts that you need to be looking at and working at, and trying to figure out the best way to make things better, continually make things better based on feedback from your team. Also, as leaders, making sure that digital transformation, is a priority of, at the highest levels. Asking your IT team, for ideas. Talking to your business leaders. Within scaling up, one of the exercises is called process accountability chart. And what it does, it forces you to go through and identify your top 4 to 7 processes in your organization, identify who's in charge of them, and then try and figure out which ones need to be improved or which ones need to be documented or systematized. But I think that's a great strategy for organizations going through work from home. And then the last thing that I had here was just utilizing continuous improvement for continuous for organizational survival. And a quote from Scaling Up that for my graphic there, it talks about that every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows that it's got to run faster than the slowest gazelle, or it will starve. Every gazelle wakes up knowing that it's got to outrun the fastest lion. And so the point out of it is that it doesn't matter whether you're the lion or the gazelle. When the sun comes up, you'd better be running. And I think the same is true for organizations right now. We've got a lot of threats. We've got a lot of organizational changes. And hopefully after going through this and talking a little bit of the strategy, you've got some tools that help you fight the fight a little bit better. And that's all I have for content. Were there any questions that were posted to the chat?
Caitlin, you want to walk us through some of the questions that are coming up?
Of course. A question we have from Kevin. We've had to use a lot of different platforms based on customer and supplier synchronicity. Any comments, good, bad, over platforms?
Well, several things there. A lot of the threats today facing our industry actually come through APIs. So platforms are great, and APIs allow them to connect to each other. But there's actually a lot of security threats around APIs, and so it might be if they're cloud-based and available to everyone, it might be that you need to invest in some security investigation around those APIs. It could be using tools like cloud security brokers to secure the cloud presence. It could be just doing a web app test against a custom written web application, or it could be that there is some effort that needs to be expended towards the individual applications, and one of the things that NIST added recently to its cybersecurity framework was about working with your vendors more, risk analysis of your vendors. So every time you sign a new vendor, or before you sign a new vendor, have your standard questionnaire that you ask your vendors around how they, how they train for security, what they do for their application, how they patch and update, what their secure development processes are, and so forth. So I think there's a lot of different things that organizations can do to work around that, on a security level, and then from every new repository or application also needs to be backed up or protected. So, making sure that before you go out and sign agreements with organizations, that you also talk to your internal IT team or service provider just to make sure that they're in the loop and able to protect it. There's a lot of different types of backups and capabilities and things out there, but typically whoever your provider is going to need to know, how quickly you need to be able to restore data if there were an issue, where the data resides, and if there were a loss, how much data could be lost, because you can't back up every minute. Well, actually, you could back up every minute, but there's a cost prohibitiveness to it that it just needs to be arbitrated with whoever your IT folks are. So I don't know if does that answer the question.
Kevin, are you good?
Yeah, I was thinking more about like the alternatives to Teams, and if there's why you guys chose Teams over Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, or if there's any of those type of applications that you would avoid. So when COVID first broke out, we jumped right on Zoom like everyone else, and then we quickly jumped right back off. And we got on Google Meet. So I think Zoom is better now, but.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that every tool is going to have its not so happy moment kind of thing. And, I think Zoom went through that. But I think that we actually had Cisco WebEx that we were using for video conferencing. And I think the big thing I would say there is that the reason we went with Teams is for a different reason. Don't get me wrong, Teams has a lot more security in it I guess it has a lot more levels of security in it because it ties into your Office 365 tenant. And so you're able to do things around data protection that some of the other tools aren't able to do. But I think that the reason we went with Teams was more for the extensibility. So within Teams, the ability to share documents, we back end for us internally, we replaced our file shares with OneDrive and SharePoint. So now I can share all of my files in a Teams room and it automatically get to all the people, as opposed to sending out an email. We got to figure out who's got the right version. Oh, there was this different version available. There was a lot more work that I think we've been able to shed using Teams, just given its extensible nature, as well as when I was at Microsoft, when I was at Redmond, what I started to hear out of the Microsoft personnel was that at some point Outlook is going to go away, and at some point Teams is going to be that ultimate repository, that single interface for everything that you have in your for communication. It's going to be able to handle, I guess in its mind, maybe email, texting, voice, video, all of those kind of things together. And today we do some of that. When we have our meetings, we record it in stream, probably like you do in Zoom, and it's available there. But I can also protect it and secure it using my normal organizational permissions. Now we have, if we've got incoming emails from external, we push those to a Teams room so that the group members can all go in and view it and look at it. So if you had, I don't know, if you had resumes coming in, you could do it that way. Being able to put up business dashboards into a team room instead of telling someone, hey, you've got to go to this web app, access this thing and look at it. It's automatically in that Teams room. So the reason we went with Teams was less about security and more about, hey, this can be a great big funnel so that people only go to one place. It was more about ease of work, why we went with Teams.
Great. Yeah, that helps.
Thank you. We have a couple of good questions from Dawn. What are some ways we can keep progress, momentum towards operational goals with remote workers?
Well, I think that that goes back to that goes to the continuous improvement type of thing. If you think of continuous improvement, I didn't go through it in detail, but I think about it a lot of how I do a network assessment. First I try to get a snapshot of where I'm at, try to figure out where I'm going, then I try and figure out the steps to get there. And then I need to come up with some ways to measure whether I'm successful along the way. And I think there's a lot of great parallels between the continuous improvement process and whatever thing you want to accomplish, because it walks you through that structured approach of, where am I at? Let me baseline everything. Then let me create a roadmap of where we're going, and then let me go through this a step at a time, and iteratively check along the way to make sure that I'm making progress towards it. So I think that using that, you're able to come up with whatever those key metrics are, whether it's engagement of employees or productivity or, whatever it is that you're trying to measure. I think that, the continuous improvement process gives you that capability to take a step back, come up with a structure, and then chunk it down into smaller problems that make it easier to resolve or keep working through over time.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Another good one. I know that mindset and maturity play a big part in remote work success. What else can we help set my employees up for success?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So sorry. I know that mindset and maturity play a big part in remote work success. What else can help set my employees up for success?
So I think there'll be some great specifics on that later, but I think that when we talk about employee engagement, to me there's a lot of gray area about what that means. But I think part of that is a big part of that is just recognition. If people are being key to the process of how things are working, it's important to recognize that, hey, if we're going to get benefits out of this, then let's extend something back to them. And I think that sometimes in remote work, that people who work hard, it's kind of a quiet, uneventful type of thing that they're doing. But it's easy for us to not say something when someone's working really hard because there's so many other issues going on. And I think that as far as engagement, that's a big part of what we need. Is we need people to know that we still appreciate them, even though they're not in front of us, and recognize that, hey, the traditional world of, hey, you've got to be there at 8:00 sharp working. That remote work life is a little bit harder to do the old-fashioned 8 to 5. And hey, if somebody's starting work at 7, then maybe I'm okay with them taking a little bit of a longer lunch or getting out to a doctor's appointment or whatever it has to be. That there's some flexibility and engagement, and treating people as a human being, and recognizing the fact that, hey, I appreciate the fact that you had a pipe burst in your house, and you were dealing with water issues, and your wife might walk in with the kids, but you were still on that call and taking care of things, and helping that client feel like everything was resolved to their satisfaction. But I think that just recognizing those things, whether you're internal IT, a service provider, or just a knowledge worker doing whatever it is that they do on a daily basis, but doing it remotely, appreciating that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. I know Miss Eve had asked about how many women are in our company, and it looks like that answer was given a little bit down. So there's 6 total right now. Let's see. And then John had a good comment about measurable goals that are measurable have a common scorecard. Accountable to those goals, have tasks with clear target dates. I like that.
All right, Jeremy, you want to take us on to our break?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Steve. Everyone, feel free to jump up and move around and do those jumping jacks that Kramer was talking about. or feel free to take a break. But if you haven't grabbed that lunch, go ahead and grab it at this time, and we'll get the next presentation started here in about 5 to 6 minutes or so. Or should we basically just push that a little?
Why don't we make it 12:15, give everybody enough time
12:15.
for a bio break. We're still a little bit ahead of schedule, so.
Excellent. Well, I do think so far, if you were here prior to the first presentation, that if you're curious, I think it's Team Queso that's way in the lead, followed up by all three, and then we have a couple of choice guacamoles, and then I think 1 or 2 salsas. But Steve had a good point. You know, salsa typically is free unless you're going to the wrong place here in Texas. Well, I think you're right, David. It kind of feels like we should have some kind of background music, but wasn't prepared to sing in this one, and definitely wanted people to stay around for the second session.
Appreciate it.
Reminder to everyone here, it's best to hang around past the question and answer session after the second panel discussion, so that you can be part of the giveaways. We have a couple of books and a rather large Amazon gift card that's available, and it's for those that are attending at that point, or still in the present, still involved in the webinar at that point. So hang around a little bit after the question and answer session, and see what happens with those giveaways.
And I guess what did everybody get for lunch? Anybody get anything good?
You kind of a weird question, or not a weird question, but an obvious question as far as like, what did you order? So if you're willing to share, please do. And if you're not willing to share, tell us what your go-to is. I think here at the office, one of our go-tos is probably Chipotle. Would you say, Caitlin? Chipotle is a common one.
All right, we got some
Yeah,
good ones
common
here
and
on the chat.
popular.
We've got Red Lobster, Pecan Lodge, Great Outdoor Sandwich Shop, Payway,
Belly.
all kinds of good stuff.
Nice.
Oh, Chaps, good burger place. I made tacos at home myself, so.
At this point, if you offer some kind of delivery, why would you not be part of DoorDash or Uber Eats?
Jeremy, what did you do today?
That was Chipotle for us here at the office.
All right.
I prefer Freebirds myself, but you can always count on Chipotle.
Another vote for Freebirds there.
Hey, Mark. We've got you muted so far. Feel free to unmute if you'd like. We're in between sessions.
Oh, no worries. No worries. It's all good.
And Mark, we had a question at the beginning. Is a very scientific poll. Queso, salsa, or guac? What's your go-to when you go to a Mexican restaurant?
Oh my gosh. Queso, salsa, or guac. I guess it depends on how bad I want to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, if I really want to be bad and not worried about the calories, if I worked out that day, then I'd say definitely I'd go for the queso or guac. But we actually my wife and I make a pretty good guacamole at home too. So we can whip one up. We can whip one of those up pretty well ourselves. So that's something we enjoy a lot.
Could be a future opportunity for you. Tableside guac maker there somewhere.
If this whole HR stuff doesn't work out for me.
There you go.
Hey, Jeremy, just to comment on your DoorDash comment you made earlier, Domino's has never made a single penny off of their delivery service. That's their loss leader.
Wow. Okay.
So it's proof you don't have to have the door dashes, but sure as heck makes it easy for people to just get into the market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're a smaller, not a chain, it's probably makes sense. If you're a big chain like Domino's, you probably do your own.
Yeah, but they had to start somewhere.
We'll get started here in about 5 minutes or so with our panel discussion. If you're just joining us, feel free to jump into chat and have it available for any questions you have during the presentation. We have a Q&A session after to be able to address whatever questions you have during the webinar. It's also best to hang around after that to be able to win one of the giveaways. We have some books and a $250, is that right, David? $250 Amazon gift card to give away.
Yeah, Steve doesn't know it, but we took it out of his account. So.
Oh, perfect.
It's going to cost me later, but had to go for it.
Nice, Luke.
I think instead of using Yelp, I'm just gonna reach out to Luke and get some recommendations. So he's got the lowdown on some good places here. It depends on what I want. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Luke, we're actually bordering Keller and Fort Worth.
Yeah, there's a Liberty Burger, I think, in the Presidio shopping area over there across from Alliance Town Center. Other side of 35. It may be, I'm not sure if it's still open or not though. Bottomless beef ribs. I don't think that's anything that I need, probably. They might shut the place down. We didn't say. We said all you can eat, not all we got.
Well, David, they're bottomless, so they can add to your bottom.
There you go.
Those are those no calorie ribs.
Yeah, they're low sugar and low sodium as well. Low fat. Low cal.
I think what's the you order something like that, but you get a Diet Coke and it all offsets. Is that what it is?
Double cheeseburger and a Diet Coke.
I just put sweet and low in my tea to balance it out.
There you go. All right, Jason, we're just about to our 12:15 time here, so we're going to turn it over to you for our panel discussion.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back, everybody. If you went somewhere, if you didn't, we'll just continue on here. For the second half of our presentation, remote work best practices and panel discussion, we brought in some experts in all different areas, from HR to culture, marketing, cybersecurity, and business leadership. So I'll go ahead and do a run through and introduce everybody. Now I'll ask you guys to say hi real quick. First one we got here is Mark Bedford from HR Catalyst Consulting. Mark is a strategic leader, management team advisor who is business and HR focused. He has 20 years working as an HR executive in mid-size all the way up to Fortune 50 companies with strengths in talent management, leadership development, coaching, improving company culture, and employee engagement. Go ahead and say hi real quick there, Mark.
Hi, everybody. Look forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic. Next, we got John Arnott, Content First Marketing. For the past 25 years, John has built his career in marketing, technology, and information systems. At Content First Marketing, John leads a 100% virtual organization that uses advanced analytics, copywriting, social media, and email marketing to drive new sales for businesses. Go ahead and say hi real quick here, John.
How you doing, everybody?
Fantastic. I love the enthusiasm. And then we have Brandon Tashida from Arctic Wolf. Brandon brings 13 years of cybersecurity experience and leadership to his role as a director of pre-sale systems engineering. I think you just made that roll up. At Arctic Wolf, they're the leader in security operations delivered as a concierge service. Go ahead and say hi real quick, Brandon.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Next, we have Joey Battlement from Ingram Micro, the sponsor of this event here. Joey's been in the IT field for 9 years, working for Dell EMC as a data center specialist. He joined Ingram in 2019, focusing on security and collaboration for Microsoft. Go ahead and say hi real quick, Joey.
Well, I feel pretty bad because everyone else has more experience than I've been alive. So I really appreciate that.
So are you saying you're 24, Joey?
I'm 24 going on 19. So yeah.
Okay, there you go. I'll vouch for that.
So real quick on this one, Joey, I've been practicing the last name. How did I do on the last name? Did I nail it?
It's okay. It's okay. When I came over on the boat, it's supposed to be Balamenti.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I don't think my tongue makes that shape. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
And then we got Bob Weirdsma from the Fulcrum Group. Bob joined Fulcrum in 2019 with over 25 years in leadership positions in information technology. Bob has held numerous managed service and IT outsourcing leadership positions, anywhere from engagement all the way through transition and delivery, both as a provider and a customer. Go ahead and say hi, Bob.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope lunch was good.
So we've only got a short amount of time here, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Don't worry, I'll leave some time at the end, so if you guys have any questions or anything, throw them into chat. We'll get back to those questions as soon as we finish it up here. I think the first one we have here is for Mark. Mark, with a remote workforce and a lack of in-person meetings, how do you effectively manage those remote workers, and how do you keep them engaged and productive?
Yeah, good question. It's and I could easily take half an hour just chatting about this one. There's a lot of meat. There's a lot of meat in there, but I'd say there's two different things here. I guess first of all, I would just say that part of it is if you, depending on what kind of workforce you have that's remote. If you have hourly employees, it's almost like from a business perspective. If you have hourly employees and salaried employees, you have to still treat those quite a bit differently. And that hourly employees, you are, of course, for everybody on the phone, every or the conversation today, every hour they work, they're paid for. For salaried employees, you don't have to do as much of the checking and balancing. So I'd say if you do have a lot of hourly folks that are remote, then you, as a manager, whether it's through technology or a system, whether it's just they dial in, they just email you when they're starting work, when they're taking their lunch and things like that. But I think part of it's just the pure logistics. With salary people, you don't have to be as methodical and when you're doing something like that. I would say from a productivity and engagement standpoint, one of the things since we've been in the pandemic, almost going on a year now, is I think that what I have found too, and I think we've all run into this. If you're on Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, GoToMeetings for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, you're just exhausted. So I think one of the key things is making sure that managers also focus on creating some fun events that are remote, whether you do a virtual breakfast, whether you do something like you're doing today where you have you give them a lunch coupon or a breakfast coupon. I know some companies are open to doing a a bourbon tasting or wine tasting or something like that, or doing a happy hour. So trying to do something that's also not just work related is really critical, because the key thing is, I'd say you've got to be able to look for the last comment I'd make there, whatever your culture is from a workspace environment, you need to try to replicate that culture in a remote environment. So if one of your core values, and I know several companies have this as a core value, is to have fun, you need to find ways to have fun even in a remote environment. So if that is every Friday, Friday at 4 p.m., you decide, we're calling it a day and we're having happy hour, and everybody grab the beverage of your choice, and we're just going to talk about how things went this week, possibly new opportunities and things like that. Just looking for those, being intentional about trying to reinforce your culture, even in a remote environment, is very, very critical, because I think we are so focused on, we do so much work now at home that sometimes we lose one of the problems leaders have quite often now is they lose their culture. It's become a very sterile work environment where we're just staring at a screen all day long. And so we need to be very intentional about finding ways to still infuse our culture into the organization. So I'll stop there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I could see how you could keep going and going and going on that one, right?
Right. You could. There's a lot of good in that. Just that short question, but it was a great question.
So Brandon, toss it over to you here. What are the top 3 things that SMBs and other organizations should do from a cybersecurity perspective in a remote work environment?
Yeah, also a great question. Just to be clear, I am that guy who's got more than 2 monitors and a very noisy keyboard, so I'll do my best not to type while I talk. But yeah, I mean, COVID has definitely left a lot of people scrambling to just figure out how to, operate their business in a newly remote world, let alone try and secure as things become more fluid and visibility has dropped. To Steve's points earlier, we've spent decades building a moat around our things, and when you take those things outside of the moat, things are obviously very different. So I'm kind of put into 3 large buckets. The first being around our end users. And kind of doubling down on security awareness training, making sure end users know how critical they are to helping protect the business. So in prep for this session, I was doing some reading of the industry rags, and Proofpoint has a really good report they publish every year around the state of the fish. So it was 3,500 survey respondents, and a couple of key things I took away from that. The big one being that only 52% of employees even knew what the word phishing meant, which is alarming, right? That doesn't mean that 48% are going to click on something and not recognize something as suspicious. That figure is actually closer to about 11%. But if an attacker targets your org of 100 people, you can bet that at least 10 of them are going to maybe click on something and be the start of something that's not so fun. So, kind of specific about things to teach end users is know their part, what can happen if you click something, whether it be coughing up credentials to a threat actor, to being the entry point for ransomware, just kind of setting the stage of what's possible there, right? More tactical things, if you're looking for ideas, so like hovering over the hyperlink in the email, if you're unsure of like who the email is from, that'll bring up the actual URL that the hyperlink will actually lead to, so taking a closer look. Obviously, never opening attachments from senders you don't know or from an email you're not expecting. Never, ever click the enable content button if you do mistakenly open an attachment. And moreover, and more of the kind of operational management side of things, Microsoft introduced a couple of years ago now the ability to actually disable macros across the board via GPO. So if you've got no business using macros in Word, you can dramatically reduce your attack surface by just getting rid of the ability for those documents to run arbitrary code behind the scenes. Kind of on the phishing theme, having a way to report suspicious emails is always a good idea, unless it's very targeted. There might be some other users who got the same email, so if you can get ahead of it and delete it from their inbox before their peer gets to it, that's always a win, right? And also, I would advocate for a shame-free policy for users to notify you if they do click on something. Obviously, the ramifications of identifying something bad happening a day or two down the road versus an hour of it happening are 2 very different things. One thing that I think can make a huge impact, and it's free and easy to do, and set up in like Office 365 or Exchange is to prepend external in the capital letters and the brackets for any email that comes into the organization that is not from your organization, right? That'll be a prompt for the users to think back to the training you gave them, have their guards up a little bit more about, okay, what is this email? Is there an attachment? Should I be clicking a link? We use it internally at Arctic Wolf. It's there, it's in your face. It doesn't bother anybody, but it's a nice, easy way of kind of putting guards up a little bit more. And then kind of lastly, on the end user front, it's not always about phishing and the entryway into an organization. One thing that there's been a massive uptick in the past couple of years is something called business email compromise. So this is the notion that a third actor is already in. They've compromised your email some way. Their goal is to lay low and slow, understand your business, with the ultimate goal of impersonating someone who has the authority to ask money to be sent from somebody else, with the ultimate goal of getting into their pockets, right? So they'll impersonate that authority figure. They'll ask someone in payroll, finance, or whatever to initiate a wire transfer, and then they'll bury any replies that initiator would send back to them via like auto delete rules, for example. So having a process before money gets sent in kind of abnormal ways to maybe call the person with the authority to initiate the transfer, or have two nuclear keys to the nuclear submarine before money goes out, to be more prescriptive about like an attack like that. Kind of the next like high level thing I would say is kind of take a look at your authentication practices. So if you're dealing with a remote workforce situation, you're kind of at the whim of your endpoint protection solution and your authentication practices. So especially for VPN and cloud SaaS applications, those are now big attack surfaces, big targets. So basic stuff like strong password policy, making sure you've got a good complexity. And I would say until things are back in normal world, having a more aggressive change policy, maybe like 30 days. So that if a user does cough up creds, or they're taken as part of another data breach, that the window that they can get in with those creds is shortened a bit, right? And then the last thing, the authentication front, always a good idea, regardless if it's remote workforce or not, but even more so important now, is enable multi-factor authentication everywhere you can. People are going to always cough up creds, right? The user is the weakest link. But if you can add in an additional something you must have, in addition to something the password, it's just going to make it a bit harder for threat actors to successfully conduct an authentication attack. And then kind of third last bullet point topic would be looking into partnering with a provider that can provide something like a managed detection and response. If you don't have the time, money, expertise to build out a SOC and hire six-figure talent to perform analysis and try and find an attack as it's happening, and I'm not talking just about like managing firewalls here. I'm talking about like 24/7 threat detection, remediation assistance. We do this. There are other providers that do it. But essentially, what we're doing here is collecting logs from your environments, whether it be from your security tools, your authentication logs, and performing a more in-depth analysis on it with runbooks, and being able to leverage things that maybe weren't quite as important before, but now in a COVID world, looking through your authentication logs and those auto delete rules and brute force attempts to have another set of eyes. And not to hopefully come off like a sales pitch or anything, but I think a lot of people are surprised to hear you can get the net outcome of a multi-million-dollar security operations center for what, 35, 50K a year because of the scale. Organizations like ours and others, we're not the only ones in this game, but it's really helped move the needle, especially for SMB businesses, which my team looks after. We're talking to, we're bringing on hundreds of new customers a year. I'm sorry, a month in a COVID world. So 3-level things, just thing to think about.
Fantastic. Let's move on to you here, Joey. Got a question for you next. What would you tell a business owner who hasn't moved their phone system to the cloud yet? What's your advice?
Well, first I have to say Brandon killed it. MFA, everything you talked about is me living in the cybersecurity world. Arctic Wolf's a great partner. I used to work for EMC. You laid it out very simplistically that these are the things that you just have to do on a day-to-day basis. But Jason, to answer your question, right? So Microsoft is entering this new realm of business voice, giving you the ability to, they can become your carrier. So they're giving you the ability to have a ton of flexibility around Teams business voice, the ability to leverage all of the newest, latest, and greatest technologies, but do it in a way you've never done it before, right? Do it in a way where whether you have an iPad, an Android, a laptop, you get that same experience across multiple devices, geographies, teams, um, jobs, platforms. No matter what you're leveraging, you're getting that same experience, no matter where you are, what you're doing, or what you're collaborating on. So the business voice part, bringing that to the cloud, is one, giving you that phenomenal enterprise level experience. But also giving it to you on any device that you have. Secondly, there's a huge reduction in carrier costs, right? You're no longer needing to leverage, the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world. You're no longer having to pay like by the minute for what you're doing. So you can really bring a huge cost reduction down by leveraging Microsoft as an actual carrier, and then leveraging the ability that in the old way of doing things, you had to have all these specific devices to leverage different, UCaaS systems, whereas with Microsoft, it's a BYOD, or you can leverage a very efficient platform to deliver that business voice. So just taking advantage of the most cutting edge technology, and giving the end user that experience no matter what device they're on, across multiple platforms and geographies and teams and projects. So just really making sure that in this new world with, the millennials that are coming up, and there's a lot of people, one of my counterparts, Abby Hansen, who's my Teams expert, she says on every boot camp we do, like, how many people have quit their job because technology was a problem, right? Like, because they weren't enabled with the right technology. I'm 40, so, I'm used to, the old dial-up modem, but the new generation, that's just not the world we live in anymore. So you have to provide that cutting edge experience, regardless of what device they're using, where they are, or how they're collaborating. So I think that's probably the 2 or 3 main points of why you would want to leverage Microsoft to move to the cloud to deliver that business voice experience.
Well, Joey, I think you bring up a really good point there. And one of the things I think of is, if you've already got Office 365 or Microsoft 365, it's a very inexpensive add-on. The users are already using Teams. The ability to onboard it very quickly is very exciting. So thanks for that information.
Fantastic. Let's move it over to you, Bob. What's your take on continued remote work even after the pandemic is over, especially with Governor Abbott making his recent announcement and everybody starting to reopen, good or bad, depending on who you talk to?
So I'll start from just experience and show my age a little bit. I remember, so I worked for a company, NCR, that was bought by AT&T, and they had a vision of everybody telecommuting, and their focus was on all the real estate costs and all of the ways that you could really improve the efficiency of your P&L. And so I think it was 92, 93, I had a 56K baud modem. So it went from 9600 to 56. That was awesome. And started telecommuting back in the day. Since then, I've spent about 15 years in a telecommute type of position. And it was a really good topic of conversation with Steve when I first was talking to him about joining. And I was asking about how many folks are working remote, and he said, we're really full contact type of company, and we've got everybody in the office. And once I was there a good month, I really understood it, and there is something to the face-to-face. Looking at the trends kind of pre-pandemic, Zoom was kind of flat. Real estate investment trusts were growing. But once they started kind of rattling the sabers about what COVID could do. I moved a lot of my investments out of REITs into different things, just kind of anticipating it. My wife works for Bank of America in a tower in Fort Worth. They're indefinite working remote, regardless of Abbott's lifting. So I really do see a shift. The estimates are 30 to 35% of people are going to continue to work remote in some capacity, whether it's a few days a week or full time. But it really gets down to three core things. You have people in their roles in a business. We have equipment coming in continuously, so we need to have someone in the office to help with configurations, get out to customer sites with installations. So engineers are always going to be key in coming into an office to get their jobs done. But there's another aspect of the personal aspect. We have people who just can't work from home because of space or the ability. So that's really another key driver when you look across your teams and really determine people and roles. Are they equipped? Steve and David have helped equip our folks with office equipment and really home office, all the furniture that's needed for them to be effective. And then, it's really important that we kind of understand that when AT&T started moving people remote back in the 90s, they said it's really a 6-month adaptation time. You have to build in time to go for a walk. You've got to really focus on your overall well-being. There's a lot to adjusting from being in an office to working from home. Time management comes into play and how people work their schedules. So there's a lot to it, Jason, but I think with all the investments in technology and the way that companies have really adopted virtual workplace, and I don't think it's going to go away. And I really do think that people are going to take a different look at real estate, what office space is needed, and kind of adapt. I've got 3 kids in their 20s, and one of them is still in school, and it's all virtual. There's nothing in classroom. He's been doing that for about a year now. The way he operates is virtual, and I really see that in the next generation of our workforce. I think it's going to even shift further. So, short answer is yes, it will be around.
Fantastic. John, let's turn it over to you. Your question is, how do you keep your company culture alive during a pandemic? And how do you maintain that company culture long term if your workforce remains mostly remote, kind of bouncing off of what Bob just said?
Thanks, Jason. That's a great question. And it would have been an excellent question a year ago about keeping the culture alive in a pandemic. That kind of implies that the pandemic is going to start, end quickly, and it's over, and we're going to hang on to this thing as long as we can. But we are now over a year into this, and really our focus needs to not be on how do we hang on to what we once had, but how do we build an effective culture when a good portion of our workforce is remote. And I think to start this off, we just want to clarify what culture is. Because in many companies, there's no effort to create it. It just kind of evolves over time. And culture is essentially how people behave and interact independent of your rules and policies. If you have to create a rule, you have to create a policy. You're not creating culture. You're creating infrastructure. And it's how these people interact with each other and behave irrespective of all that. And as all of us have seen, even though we may have had great cultures in the past, a virtual culture is just different. The way we interact with each other is different. We have amazing tools, amazing technologies, and process, things that David was talking about in the past. We didn't have that before. We have these things now, but it's different. And so with this in mind, you have to ask yourself, the culture that we had a year ago, is it a culture that we want to keep alive? Or is this something where the real question is, how do we evolve our culture? How do we change our culture? And how do we be intentional with our culture so that if 20% of our workforce are in the office and 80% are remote, that we can continue and grow and improve as a company? Steve and Mark both mentioned core values. And so when I think about culture, I think about how people interpret, interact, and display those core values. And when you go to a virtual company, when you have a remote workforce and you were disrupted in that way, you might find that it's not the culture that needs to change. You may actually find some of your core values need to change because the way people are working change, because the way people are interacting with clients is changing. And so we'll probably talk a little bit about leadership later, but be thoughtful of that a culture is intentional and that a culture is reflective of the core values, whether explicit or implicit, and that when you're building your company and you're moving to this remote new normal, that your values need to evolve and some things need to change. Now, you also asked, how do you keep it going? And so, you have to keep things fun. You have to share what you do, and you have to be explicit with that. So if you're using something like Teams, you have a company team and you have a channel and it says, hey, show me what you did. And maybe it's funny pictures or things like that. Or maybe you have a channel where you're celebrating wins. You're being a lot more purposeful in your communication, a lot more explicit in your sharing to also convey that fun. So I hope that answers your question there, Jason.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think all you guys have brought up so much good information. I don't think we're going to have time for our second round of questions here. Let me go a little bit off script here. I'm going to start back up at the top. And what I'd like you guys to do, since we only have about 15 more minutes here, is just starting with Mark, just take a couple minutes here. Kind of give us your key takeaway. If you could only tell them one thing over the next couple minutes, what would that be?
Wow. Yeah, I'd say let me think about that for a couple minutes, but I know we can't. So, I would say the key thing is, because I do agree, the panelists all said great points, that I think, remote workforce is here to stay. There's been, I think, John, I think it was highlighted that you've got 100% remote workers and you work in a virtual environment. I would say the key thing you've got to be thinking about too is, so the one key takeaway there is that given that, let's say the fact is that there will be some percentage of employees who will continue to work remotely in 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, after we can put COVID, COVID will be a thing of the past. I would say that for organizations to do this successfully, they have to be very careful. If you're thinking that, let's just take a scenario of 50-50 split, 50% of your workers are in person, 50% remote. I would say you need to do everything you can and be very, very intentional about sorting out who can actually work well in a remote environment, because you do need time management, but also because I'm an HR guy and I've got a couple degrees in psychology. Some people you've got your, the simplest example would be introverts and extroverts. Your extroverts will not do well in a individual, work from home environment typically. Your introverts love that because they're just heads down. They don't need a lot of interaction, collaboration, teamwork. So I would say that if you are looking for having X percentage of your workforce be virtual, after, when you're looking at hiring, I would say one of the key things you need to think about as a business owner, business leader, hiring manager, whomever you are, is really be very scrutinizing and very intentional about the hiring process, because there will be people who are very competent, but they will really fail. If they're an extrovert, they will really fail there's a high probability they'll fail in a remote environment. Versus an introvert who may be a programmer. So in IT, if you're a programmer, I worked in the telecommunications industry years ago, and we had thousands of engineers, and they would be lights out, heads down programming, and they didn't care what time of day it was. And so I'd say they were very introverted and very caught up in their work. So be very careful about who you're hiring if you are going to continue to have X percent of your workforce be remote. Because quite often you may have a great employee, but that person will need to be in a work environment, whereas a person who's a little more introverted will do extremely well and thrive in a remote environment. So that would be kind of my biggest takeaway from the conversation.
Fantastic. Brandon, what's your one thing that you want people to walk away with today?
Only one?
Only one.
Well, I mean, I would say I think the reality of remote work is probably here to stay, at least in some capacity. So the notion that things are going to get back to normal on the security front, with everything coming back into the walls and getting the visibility once had, probably isn't realistic. But moreover, it's not just like a tools problem that we need to focus on. It's also kind of operational. So, for example, COVID has introduced a 40-day increase in patching, right? That's a big window for a patch to come out and not to get it deployed for risk exposure. So kind of getting a practice around long-term what it would look like to stay more on top of your patches. Same for going to the cloud with work from home. That's going to introduce a ton of operational challenges. 95% of all cloud breaches are a result of a misconfiguration. So getting a handle on that. So it'd just be like, I would say we're probably a completely new paradigm, even though I hate that word, in trying to protect our environments. They're probably not going to go back to what they originally were. Whether in your organization now or you move on to the next one, kind of got to be thinking about things a bit differently. And I think operationally is how you do it.
Fantastic. Joey, what's your one takeaway you want people to learn from this?
I would sign Tom Brady to the Buccaneers so that you can in the Super Bowl and dominate the NFL. That's what I mean. If I had to fix my security problems, I'd just call Tom Brady because he'd do it all. But all joking aside, I have to ride that one as long as I can. All joking aside, I really think that, in my opinion, it's how do you manage the mobile devices, right? We've all gone, as everyone on the call knows, we've gone from this, going to work situation to being remote, but we all have these little supercomputers in our hands and tablets and iPhones and laptops. So it's how do we make sure that we are managing what type of data flows through those devices? How do we control that data? Whether it's someone's personal cell phone and you're managing the corporate applications and protecting that data. My engineer we do a boot camp, and he talked about how he was trying to move data to his personal iPad, and Ingram wouldn't let him via Intune. But managing where and how and what you do with data from a remote, whether it's a tablet, a phone, laptop, I think that's actually one of the most crucial things is everyone's the most expensive commodity in the world now is data. It's our data. It's not gold, it's not oil, it's data. So how do you protect that data and what people do with it? So that would be besides signing Tom Brady, that would be probably second.
Tom Brady, you're going to stand by Tom Brady, huh?
I mean, hey man, we're going back to back, so
fantastic.
And
You still got a ways to go to get to the 5 Cowboys Super Bowl victories, though. So,
I mean, I think we could sign Tom for another 3 or 4. So I mean, we could, we know the Cowboys aren't going to win anytime soon. So I mean,
probably not.
Fantastic. All right, Bob, you got a couple minutes here. What do you want people to take away from this?
Well, there's a common theme, and Mark touched on it previously. I think when we were in the office, there's a lot of camaraderie, and there's a lot of, you get to know people. When they're remote, I think, any good leadership trait is focus on people first. And it really went to the next level when COVID hit, because you needed to understand. I had folks on my team who were single, married with kids at various ages. And, from a personal perspective, I worried about their kids' mental health and all the stuff they were going through with homeschooling. So I'd always start with people and make sure that the conversation started on a personal note to understand, how are you holding up? How's your family? How are your parents? How's your mom? And that's really, I think, the key to what everybody's in a different situation. Everybody's got a lot going on. Personal stressors, customer stressors, and really starting at that point is I think the most critical, because if you can help your people do their best, you're going to get the result. So my key takeaway is just, this last year kind of rocked everybody's world, and just be a humanist. It's not the time to be a machinist in many cases, although it's got to be a part of leadership. But it's just being intentional about making sure your people are all right and able to perform the best they can.
Fantastic. So we'll slide it over to you, John. You can go ahead and bring us home. What's your one thing you want everybody to take away today?
Sounds good. All right, Jason. So if I'm thinking about one thing you need to take away, if you're running a virtual team, it's asynchronous communication. And so what you have to do is you have to build out a culture of over communication. I mean, I'm talking about if somebody sends a note in there, you reply with a thumbs up, you do an acknowledgement. You have to complete the communication loop, because you don't get the nod, you don't get the smile, you don't get the wink in the hallway. So you have to have that acknowledgement. So over communicate. And then on that topic, a culture of gratitude. So if you're doing this all asynchronously written, it's like, thank you, or I want to give a shout out, you nailed it with the client, or this is amazing work, or hey, I called that person for you, thank you so much. Over communication and gratitude are the foundational elements to build out a asynchronous virtual culture and ultimately a great team.
Fantastic.
Did you set John up to close it out like that? Because I mean, he killed it.
Well, I mean, I threw a watermelon, so I expect him to nail it, right?
All right.
So I think at this point we want to roll it over to a little bit of Q&A. We'll open it up here in just a second so people can jump in and ask questions. I did see one that there was a question for Brandon, and I think, Brandon, you answered it in chat, but the question was, can Arctic Wolf support Red Hat? And can you go ahead and verbalize that a little bit in case there's a couple people in here who don't have the chat open?
Yeah, I can clarify. So in general, our philosophy is to ingest logs from pretty much anything you already have, but also we bring our own tools to the table in form of network sensor and endpoint agents. Our managed risk agent runs on Linux Red Hat. So that's a long way of saying, yep, we've got you covered on Red Hat.
Fantastic. I think at this point,
there was a question, Jason, from Keith, and I think it was related to the culture of gratitude. How do we communicate this to management? I think that's a question for John, I think.
I'll be happy to answer that one. Well, you have to lead by example, and if you're implying management is above you, then it has to start there. And if you don't have an environment where the core values embrace something like that, then, as they always say, if you want to do something, start with yourself. Acknowledgement, gratitude, appreciation, and closing communication loops. Start with yourself if you can't get your leadership to do it in alignment with a core value.
Fantastic. I think at this point, do we want to open it up and let people jump in? You can go ahead, unmute yourself, and ask a question if you have one.
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left for some questions. So
don't be Mike scared. Go ahead and jump in there.
Don't make me call on somebody. I'll get Steve to call on you.
Man, you guys must have done such a good job. There's no questions.
Either that or everybody just wants to get to the Amazon gift card. One or the other.
There you go. We got Denise raising her hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself over there, Denise.
Hi, I work for a nonprofit. We are very service oriented. We have a charitable medical clinic, a dental clinic, and even a cataract clinic that we do free cataract procedures. A lot of our stuff is on site. We can do some telehealth and other things like that. But how do you find that balance and manage that tension between the ones who absolutely cannot work from home and the ones that it is an option for them, while they understand it intellectually, how do we help communicate that more relationally so that there's not a tension between, well, they're not having to check in all the time and I have to be at my desk all these hours. How do we do that?
I have a comment on that, and it's not a quick fix. It's evolving kind of a mindset from going to work to getting work done. So historically, we always think, I'm going to work. So I go somewhere, I spend some time there, I leave. And that's my mindset about the work I do. But if you can transform that, again, this is kind of being a leader, not a manager, transform that, leading towards a model where everybody, whether they're physically present, whether they're on a support desk where they're bound to a certain set of hours where they have to do something, or they are aligned with specific objectives that they have to get done that doesn't really matter when it's done. If everybody has the mindset that it's all about getting work done and we're all in this together to get certain things done, that will help get down that path and get rid of that resentment. Again, it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term play, but just word choice, right? You get rid of the concept of going to work and turning it into getting work done over time, and hopefully that can help with situations like that.
Mark, what's been your take on that? Keeping people going forward the same direction.
No, I loved John's comment too. I think it's really is it's somewhat of a mindset shift. I would say the other big thing too is that, and especially if you really start looking at, maybe it's not with your current staff, but I think even with your current staff, I think we all understand, because for those of us who have been working in a remote environment for a better part of this year, we understand that, I think often there's that we are actually more productive some days because we don't have the distractions of an office setting. And so I think in some cases that we will actually have people are clamoring for that, especially those extroverts, which I talked about previously. They're clamoring for that interaction and that collaboration. So I think in some cases it could be a situation, and that, Denise, not to pick on your situation specifically, but I would imagine in your work environment too, there are some positions which are essential to work in an in-person environment, where some may not be. So you could even say this role could be done easily from either an in-office or remote environment, could be one way to look at it. And then I would go back to the other thing around personality, because I think there are as many people, the split of people, just, high level, introvert versus extrovert is roughly about 50-50. And I would say that there are people who are just naturally going to self-select for, I think I'd be more productive in a at-home environment, whereas others are much more productive. They gain energy by being around people. So I think there would be a way to do that. Again, have a game plan going into it, knowing you may not possibly be able to meet everybody's needs. So I think, again, for leaders to be very intentional about what that looks like. But I think in some cases, people will naturally self-select, and it could also be based strictly on the role itself, because the role itself may dictate that needs to be an in-office role. But in some cases, I think when you have that basis, I think, people will actually self-select one way or the other.
Fantastic. Dave, do we have time for one more? I saw one more question that popped up.
Yeah, we'll make this the last one, and then we'll turn it over to Steve for a couple of minutes. Actually, we got two more quick questions, and then we're going to turn it over to Steve. So the first question is on securing the VPN. Since a lot of these are hosted in the cloud, what opportunities are there to secure the data? We got Brandon or Joey. Either one of you guys want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the big one is going back to the multi-factor authentication. Don't just allowing a username and password to be your entryway into the VPN, which grants you access to the rest of the resources you're trying to get to, right? So for me, that'd be the biggest bang for the buck if you're talking about securing VPN, regardless of where it lives and terminates.
I
Good
think
one.
Brandon said on multi-factor authentication is the easiest thing to enable and probably the most impactful. And just understanding, you know, how are you managing that data? Who's in control of it? Where does it go? So regardless of you know whether you're bringing your own device or you have a corporate device, you can make sure you protect that information, that data.
Fantastic.
All right. And then we got one final question here. Has anyone developed a checklist of sorts to determine who could adapt to remote versus working in the office? And John had kind of thrown a little bit of a comment out there, but John, you want to extrapolate about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll comment on that, and I think Mark may have wanted to comment on it as well. What we do, we have two ways to do this. First off, because we're 100% virtual and 100% asynchronous, you know, with some synchronous communication in Teams, we have to have people that work that way well. And so it's very, very simple. In our hiring process, in that workflow, you know, you post your job on Indeed, LinkedIn, wherever you're posting your job, okay? You're putting it out there, they're going to the site, they're filling out a form. So far, pretty basic stuff, right? What happens then is they get an email, all right, confirming that they did this, and we ask them, please reply back with your current resume. Now, I know you're thinking, well, gee, can't they just upload it? Of course they can. But this is a very specific step because we have a 20% drop off of people that just don't reply, okay? So I don't have to worry about those people. And the second step is then we evaluate that resume and we evaluate their LinkedIn and we make sure they fit, all normal stuff, right? And then they get an automated email to click a link to schedule the first call. The first encounter with us is a phone call that they have to book. And if they can't handle that, then it's not a fit either, okay? We get about another 10 to 20% drop off there. And then after that, if it's really good call and we're getting into face-to-face, our face-to-faces are like this. They're through Teams. And the next one is a link to book. Now, you'd be surprised how many people drop off in the process because this doesn't work. Or you'll have send somebody a link and they'll do is call or email you saying, hey, how do I book this appointment? Or they'll email saying, I'm available at this time. Well, a person like that does not fit in an asynchronous culture, at least not like ours. And so we get a good drop off in the hiring process to make sure they fit. And then the second half is we're using a tool called Predictive Index. There are many great ones out there. That just happens to be the one we chose. And in Predictive Index, we can see if their personalities, you know, Mark made a great point about extroverts and how you have to provide them something. So when we do PI, we don't determine if they're not going to work out, but we have to determine how we're going to nurture them. If I'm hiring an extrovert, the manager of that extrovert needs to make time to have a call with them just to sit there and listen, to let that person talk, because that's what they need. And so we use PI to help figure out where they're going to fit. On the other hand, kind of, again, tied to what Mark said, if they're a very introverted personality, what we need to know is let them do their work heads down and focus, and we check in on their tasks. Are things getting checked off, or are they falling behind? That's how we check up on them, because they don't want to interact. They just want to get their work done. And if they're getting their work done, we leave them alone. But the PI tells us how to interact with them. So those are the two pieces we use.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, John, because I do have several clients that I work with that use Predictive Index. You know, and there are some even Predictive Index. It's you do pay a price, a cost for it, but there are other tools that are excellent at doing that too. That also could be you could administer yourself and that are free. You know, so I would look for that too. I love the process around the workflow and making sure that person has to own the workflow and own the hiring process themselves, which is huge. But I would just say that the other big thing would be looking at perhaps you can actually do something from an assessment perspective, because there's so many good ones out there, and some of them are low cost, no cost. Some are a little bit more higher cost, but there's several out there, and pick one that works for you and you can easily administer. And another one that's could work in this situation would be Disk. It's not going to be as elaborate as Predictive Index, but DISC. There's lots of, there's that one's a free one. And there's other assessments that are also free that can help you also be able to understand if that person is going to be successful in a virtual type of work environment.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for all you guys. That was a lot of information. A lot of really, really good nuggets there. So I think after this, we're going to be sending out the recording, correct, David?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And we'll have the recording. We'll have Steve's presentation. And we'll have some other content that we're going to be providing as well with some other best practices around remote work. So
if you're like me and there was too much good information, you didn't catch it all, you can go back and watch the recording and pick up anything that you left up on. I think at this point, we're going to turn it over to Steve, and Steve can give us a big takeaway and let us know what his main thought was from today for both his presentation and the panel discussion.
Wait, I'm going to do what?
Give us your main takeaway.
All right. Could you rephrase the question?
Oh, Steve. What's your big takeaway from today? And include the panel discussion too. I want to hear your thoughts on the panel discussion too.
I think that the big takeaway is that work from home is going to take some work. We've done something that we hadn't done before, or expanded on something that we had before, and it's just going to take continual tuning. It's like a living, breathing organism that's going to take effort from us. And I think some of the points that were brought up earlier about how do you manage performance, I think we're going to have to go back and rethink things that seem unrelated. It may be we have to go back and redo job descriptions and identify on the job description whether it's remote capable or requires in-office work. I think we need to go back and look at our key performance metrics, our key performance indicators for individuals and departments, and make sure that they get that sense of alignment. I think that we need to make sure that as we do this, as we make big changes like this, that it affects lots of parts of the organization. And I think I identified 3 or 4 in my content, and all the other speakers identified other areas from the how the borders are protected to the HR implications to just other considerations that we hadn't thought of. And yeah, I think putting all those together and keep chipping away at it's going to be the only way we're going to be able to make it better.
Awesome. Is there anybody that's in here that wasn't one of the speakers that wanted to jump in and tell us their big takeaway on this whole thing? Anything that you guys took away, anything you learned? Maybe you know now that you didn't know before?
Yeah, anybody from the audience? Anybody? Jeremy, what about you? What did you learn today? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like it's a work in progress, and no one has it 100% in hand just now. But as long as we all have efforts to, make changes and do a little bit more than just chatting about it, but actually putting in the behavior to see the results from those changes, then we can all have more efficient and more effective workplaces.
Very nice.
Yeah, somebody said in here, the personal side of remote working.
Yeah.
It's not just a bit and a byte on a computer.
Well, that's why, when we have our daily huddles and we have, the joke of the day, or what's your favorite vacation spot, or your favorite movie, or those kind of things. I love that, because I get to learn something about our coworkers. And, just since we don't have a chance to go to lunch and do some of those other things, it's good to see those things.
Yeah, I also like what Luke said, is treating it like you're going into the office. Even if you're working from home, get up, get dressed, prep just like you're going in the office, get yourself ready to work. I think that was a big one for me too. Treat it like a work day, even if you're at home.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for all of the feedback and all of those things. We'll